Welcome back to Going All In, Get the Edge You Need to Succeed. I'm Dr. Erin McKinley, and this episode is a compilation of interviews I did with 4 graduates of LSU Dietetics in the class of 2022 who have been with me throughout their entire journeys here at LSU. And we go through a lot of cool scenarios and questions and get to dive deep into each of their individual and very unique experiences being a dietetic student and their experiences with applying for internships and what it was like to match to their top programs of choice. Check it out. All right, give us a little bit of an introduction to you, your hometown, a little bit of your why and your why for dietetics, and then where you're headed after graduation.
Okay, so I'm Cameron Panks. I'm from Baton Rouge. I lived in cities all around Baton Rouge, so I just say that I'm from Baton Rouge. I found my passion for dietetics when I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 2014. So I was 14 years old. Obviously, I lived a whole life without it, so I had to change a lot at that time, learn how to manage my diabetes with nutrition, and I found a passion for it, honestly, and I just saw how it's changed my life, and I really want to do that for other people. And I am going to be a dietetic intern at North Oaks in Hammond, Louisiana. So that's going to be my next steps.
So I'm Meredith Giles, and I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And a little bit of why I got into dietetics was I grew up loving to cook. I was watching, Food Network instead of the Disney Channel as a kid. And ultimately I was like, I want to be a chef. Like, that's my goal. And then I realized there was a lot that goes into that and like running a business. And I was like, I don't know if that's for me. And then during high school, part of my PE course, we had to do a nutrition class. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And I was just like, this is really cool, like how food interacts with our body and how what we eat really plays a part in, how we feel. So I started to look into it and found dietetics as a field. And I ended up job shadowing one of these sports dietitians here at LSU my senior year of high school. And after that day, I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I know I'm on the right path. So after graduation in a couple weeks, I am heading to Florida State University to pursue my master's degree in exercise physiology with a major in sports nutrition and complete my dietetic internship.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Polo. I am originally from Whippany, New Jersey, which is a little small town right outside of New York City. I'm probably like 30 minutes away, which is normally what I tell everybody instead. I am going to Ouachita Baptist University for my dietetic internship and then for my master's of science and nutrition. And I chose dietetics because I really loved science in high school. I had a really big passion for cooking as well, and a lot of things in my life with nutrition and my health kind of all coincided all at the same time, and I really found a passion for food and nutrition, but more so of the clinical side of it and specifics to dietetics. And I started LSU as a dietetics major, and I have not changed, and here I am.
Maddie. I am from Metairie, Louisiana, and I am going to be doing my internship at Tulane, so I'm going to be moving back home. A little bit about my why. Like all of us, I found a passion for nutrition science. I kind of came a little bit later, and so for me, it was kind of finding an area of healthcare that I was excited about, that I wanted to educate about, that I was comfortable with. So yeah, just kind of moving on from there. I'm very excited. Switching to dietetics was like the best decision that I ever made. I'm very excited to go to Tulane, and I'm ready for it.
So what were some thoughts that you were having about making this pretty big life decision about where you were going to go next after graduation?
Definitely scary. For me, it was kind of reprioritizing everything I was doing. My kind of thought process was, okay, I need to do this, this, and this. I need to get this done. Should go get experience here so I can look better for this. So it was kind of the main thought process changed, reevaluating, kind of deciding what I needed to do and how I needed to do it. More so than it was scary. It was definitely trying to figure out, where's the best fit for me? Where do I need to go? But, you get in your head a lot. My biggest fear was, oh, I'm not going to be as strong as an applicant compared to some of my peers. But you do reprioritize everything. And so it's a scary process, but it's kind of exciting because, it gives you something to look forward to in the end.
So I really wanted to keep in mind like my financial state because I mostly support myself. So I wanted to make sure I got a part-time position so I could still work and save money. I will be having to come out of pocket for the internship, so I want to be able to save enough money to pay for it. I've been good about not taking out loans so far in school, so ideally I do not want to do that going forward. I just have one more step, so might as well save for what I can and pay for that way. And also my family was something I wanted to consider. I'm really close to my pawpaw. I was the kind of kid that went to my pawpaw's house every weekend instead of hanging out with my friends. So he actually saw me in the depths of like me being very sick, and actually like went to a diabetic coma on his couch. So he quite literally saved my life. And so like he's also just seen the way that nutrition has helped me, and he's invested a lot in my future and in me. So I wanted to stay close to my pawpaw just so he could see me become a dietitian and see how life turns out for me. So those are the two things that I mostly considered when choosing like my dietetic internship.
It was definitely intimidating, and especially listening to kind of my other classmates, because I really did put all my eggs in one basket. I was like, I'm going to FSU, like that's the only place I'm gonna apply. If I don't match, like I'll just head there, start my master's. So kind of during the whole applying process, I felt pretty confident. I felt like I had done most of the right things. I had been involved in sports at LSU. I had done the community, the food service side of things. And then I remember after everything was submitted, I was like, oh no, like I just had this panic set and I was like, did I do the right thing only applying to one program? And ultimately, I think I just trusted in myself to know like, even if I didn't match, there were still options. Like it wasn't the end all be all, and just trust in the process, trust that even if you don't match the first time, it's not the end of the world and there's still options. So that was definitely like my comfort factor in all of that. But overall, it was a very like, you still feel like a kid when you're trying to make like all these big life decisions.
I had a lot of liberty in the sense of I didn't have to be in a specific place. I didn't have to be back home in New Jersey. I didn't have to be also here in Louisiana. So I really wanted to take that to my advantage and find a place that fit with everything I was looking for. I was definitely looking for a smaller cohort. I was very used to a bigger school, but I grew up in a kind of smaller town with a smaller class. So I kind of was really looking for that. I also was considering price as well. I definitely wasn't too sure if I was going to get my master's at first because I'm obviously very lucky and I got grandfathered in, so I wasn't required for one. But after taking your class and you suggesting it, I really kind of thought about it more, and I thought, it was a good idea. And if there was a program that kind of wasn't too expensive, that would still provide me with an internship and then also kind of a master's at the same time, was something that I was really looking for. I didn't want to do an internship or do a master's first and then get considered for the other thing. I kind of wanted to do it knowing, okay, you're in the master's, you're in the internship at the same time, no more applications, you're done, you're one and done. And then I also consider me to be like really a faithful person. And though at first before Washita, I really wasn't considering a program that was faith-based, but then Washita kind of popped up and it had everything I liked. And then I was like, oh, but it's also faith-based. And I was like, man, that would be really cool. So that was really like, it wasn't a requirement at first, but then after going through the application process, I really, really loved that. And then it kind of turned into, well, are there any other faith-based universities that also offer dietetics and a master's potentially as well?
So how did you explain the fact that you need to continue on and do more school after LSU to become a dietitian? Because it can be confusing. So how did you kind of put that into words for your family to understand?
Yeah, it was very, very hard to explain to my family because though my mom is a nurse and she knew what a dietitian was, it was more of like, well, why do you have to do this? Like, I thought we kind of signed up for this and it was just going to be undergrad. Like, and to be honest, I really didn't know much from freshman year and sophomore year that I had to do an internship until really the end of freshman year. And when I heard people talking about an internship, and I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. I just thought it was like, oh, like an optional thing. And then after realizing, oh no, like I have to do this in order to sit down and take my RD exam. And I was like, oh man, like I didn't realize this. But like I was still super pumped. And so when I told them that, they're like, oh, okay, so how much does that cost? And telling them, and I was like, on an average, I think I said somewhere like, normally depending on the program, like about 10,000 or sometimes a little bit more. And they're like, oh, okay. And then when I told them I wanted to get my master's too, they're like, Anna, is this really smart financially? And I was like, oh, I think that it's going to be worth it in the end. And just I had to sit them both down and explain to them the process. And even like the day before match day, my dad's calling me. So what if you get accepted into two or more schools? I'm like, that's unfortunately not happening. Like you get matched with one program. Well, what if you don't like that program? Well, then I wouldn't have applied. And just questions like that I just have to repeat sometimes to my family. But for the most part, they were pretty supportive after I kind of took my GRE, and after I was really more serious about it, they were kind of like, oh, okay, like she's really trying to do this. Like we support this, whatever you want to do, whatever you need to do in order to become a dietitian, we're here for you. And even that means masters.
Did mainly as a stepping stone. The big thing was kind of comparing it to things that they did understand. So I did compare it to med school a lot and kind of saying, I'm going to have rotations, I'm going to be doing clinical stuff, I'm going to be doing community stuff, and kind of using terms that they understand, because the word internship does throw people off. And so I kind of use words like program and graduate and school. So I think kind of depending on where you go, you can use words like that kind of better get the point across as to what you're going to be doing. But kind of putting it in terms and relating it to things that they understand.
Just told them as I learned it, I didn't know much about it until like really the dietetics professionalism class that you taught us. I didn't really know about the application process and like the matching and stuff like that. So whenever I found that out, I kind of just told them about all the requirements I would have to have, like resume, of the letter of recommendations, my personal statement, stuff like that. So it would come up in conversation, like at family dinner and stuff. And I told them that we all knew that I had to do an internship. We didn't know the specifics for a while, but whenever I told them I had to do 1,000 hours of like food service management, community, and clinical work, and just kind of broke it down for them. I mean, they didn't really get to see it hands-on, but just throughout it, like, they'd check up on me and I'd update them and stuff like that. So they've been a good support system. They've just been proud of me for pushing through and doing everything I need to for it.
So I definitely had to explain it a few times for them to fully grasp it. And even some of my family is just like, it is what it is. Like, we're not going to try to fully understand it. But I think just breaking it apart and relating it kind of more to things that they understand. So I kind of explain matching in the sense of like, you know, like when you go to residency school and you're a doctor, you get matched. It's kind of the same concept there. And just sitting down and taking the time to explain in like as juvenile terms as possible, like I have to get my undergrad degree. Then there's an internship portion. No, it's not paid, unfortunately, unless I do this like one specific, like, you know, VA route. And I was like, and then you have to get a master's on top of that. And then, you know, they all have questions about kind of the matching process. And that's a little more difficult to explain, but just kind of going into how you basically say where you want to go and the internships plug into a program, who they want to go there. And ultimately the computer does its little technical stuff and matches you to a program, hopefully.
All right, so outside of your fellow students and the faculty, who were you turning to for support throughout this process?
So definitely my family was a big support system along with my friends. I mean, my mom was my number one supporter through this whole thing. I remember on match day, she like ran out of her room with a congratulations balloon for me. And I was like, what were you going to do with that if I didn't match? But she was definitely the one that like believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. My friends as well were always there, like cheering me along the way. But I think my biggest support system was my work family, because they were the ones, you know, they were registered dietitians. A few of them had gone to Florida State, which is the program I wanted to go to. So just to have that support and people who had already been through it, they understood the stress and commotion of the whole thing, just to be like, you know what, like take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. You're doing great. You're doing all the right things, was very comforting, because they've been there. You know, your family hasn't gone through the whole process of it. Your friends, you know, unless they're in the same major, haven't gone through the whole process. So to hear somebody who was a registered dietitian in sports, which is what I want to do, be like, take a deep breath, like it's all okay, you're going to be fine, was very, you know, supporting and comforting to me.
Very lucky, and my family and friends were very supportive of everything that I was doing, and they were very excited for me. Lacking support actually was in my coworkers. So for them, it was kind of, oh, so does this mean you're going to be leaving us soon? You know, and everyone kind of, they have their own priorities. So they kind of needed to understand that they needed to rehire and look forward in that way. But it's kind of like, oh, well, hope you don't have to go too far, kind of hoping that, you know, I could stay working for them during this process. But, you know, I was very lucky with the support that I did have from my family and friends. So just kind of taking what they said with a grain of salt, but everyone's got their own priorities.
I would have to say, if it wasn't outside of LSU, I did I guess it was it was a mentor-mentee program with the University of North Florida, which was such a cool opportunity. Got to work with a pediatrics dietitian, which I'm very interested in pediatrics and adolescents. So that was such a cool opportunity. And it was really, I did that my junior year. So having that kind of really close to the deciding factor of internships and locations and GRE, she was just really reassuring to me about the whole process and just reminding me like, you know, like I got through it, and we had very similar academic undergrad backgrounds. And that was something that was a huge concern of mine, because academically, I'm not as strong compared to my other peers in my class. So I really was nervous when it came to getting matched. And she was really, really positive, really, really assuring, and was just providing me like really a ton of resources to use. So even when I had questions going into my internship, I would shoot her a text, be like, hey, can you, like, what's your advice with this? Or what would you think about this? But besides LSU, I mean, she was really the main one that I think, and having that like established relationship with her really got to the point where I could text her and I could contact her with any questions that I had.
Really close relationship with my endocrinologist, my diabetes doctor, and also my diabetes educator. So they've really gotten to see me grow as a person and a patient. I can say that I'm definitely one of their favorites. only because I do really care about myself and my health. And it's clear just, with my lab results and stuff like that, like it makes it easier that I know how to manage myself and my condition, makes their job easier, makes my life easier. So they've been following me along the process. Every time I see them, they ask about how school's going and what's next and stuff like that. So they've been super supportive, super happy for me to see me grow in this way.
Very cool. I was not expecting you to say that. So what are some things that you wish you knew either earlier in the program, earlier in this process, earlier in life when it came to trying to become a dietitian?
I would say, what really with the requirements changing like mid college, experience for me, learning that, eventually like we will have to have a master's degree, stuff like that. That was something I had to consider going forward. And if I would have enough time to get with a bachelor's degree and things like that. And then like just, I guess, the specifics on the internship. I didn't know the hours or like the different kinds of clinical rounds and stuff like that. I really had no idea what the internship would be like. So I guess really, and honestly, it's not so much the internship that I was like worried about, but like the application was kind of overwhelming. So I wish I kind of would have known that like maybe my sophomore year or freshman year. Obviously it didn't deter me in any way. And like taking the class that you taught us, it really prepared us for that. We have a lot of the resources already made and ready and available for that. So that made it a lot easier. But learning that in my junior year was kind of like, oh snap, like I need to get on it. Like, but I will say that it hasn't deterred me in any way, but I have seen like other classmates kind of be overwhelmed by it and have not chose to become licensed dietitians, I guess because of being afraid of it, I guess. But I've always encouraged people to do what they got to do for themselves. And so, yeah.
One thing I wish I knew was to start researching early on, because there are so many programs and you really need to know what you want. And then they have programs that can fit with what you want. There's so much diversity. And I was talking to one of my friends that's going to PA school. Like PA school, it's pretty like standard across the board. It's just like the institution that you want to go to. But like with dietetics, every internship is different in their own ways. So knowing like what you want personally, like I knew I wanted to work with pediatric adolescents, and I knew I wanted to do eating disorders. So I unfortunately really didn't start researching until my senior year, because I would consider very, very lucky in the sense that we had your class and we were very prepared, and I didn't take it until senior year, which was a blessing, but also I wish I took it junior year so I could start researching a little bit more. But I was still able to find places that had everything, and definitely researching and knowing what you want, because then everything, you can kind of narrow your search a little bit shorter. Because I remember listening to all your podcasts and you've made at least, you're almost at 100 at this point. Like I feel like you're almost at 100. So, and I listened to every single podcast, places that I've never been, or I just didn't know exactly what I wanted. And I think after having a realization, like, no, like I know what I want, find a school that has what you want. Don't just kind of sign up and go anywhere,
I came in, I feel like overly prepared. I had done a lot of research on kind of what all needed to be done. I knew coming into undergrad that a master's degree was something that was like looming. But I think the one thing like I wish I had known a little before coming in was just the amount of like work you would have to put in outside of, your typical classes and job that you might have, and really, pushing yourself to get all of that volunteer experience, because ultimately that's what's really going to put you over the top when you do end up submitting your applications. So I think just being more aware of that and how crucial and important that is one thing I wish I would have known kind of freshman year, so I could have gotten a head start on it.
Well, I wish I would have looked at programs a lot earlier than I did. I kind of didn't consider my options until I took NFS 3025. And by that point, I was already in my senior year, so I didn't allocate enough time to take the GRE, and I didn't allocate enough time to even study for it. So that kind of limited me in some of the options that I could have had, because I knew I wanted to stay in Louisiana, but that did provide a limitation because I couldn't have as many options on my plate, I guess, when it came to that. So I wish I would have looked a little bit earlier than I did into the details of the programs.
What is your honest opinion of the DICAS application system and any of the other application materials you may have had to prep?
Unpopular opinion, I did not think DICAS was that bad. I thought it was pretty easy to navigate. I thought the hardest part was the transcripts and kind of making sure that what was exactly on my transcript was what was exactly going to be in the DICAS submission part for it. And like I said, I must have probably checked that 100 times. That was the hardest part, but the help section in DICAS was actually pretty thorough, and I felt it wasn't too hard to navigate. As far as other application materials, application videos were probably the bane of my existence, and those took a lot of time to prepare and to record. And I think I probably spent a whole entire day for my Tulane application video. So that's probably the hardest part for me and took the most time. But as far as DICAS goes, I thought it was fine.
So really, it was lengthy, overwhelming, and time consuming. I definitely opening it was a different story. And it was almost like each time I'd go into a different subcategory, it was like a whole nother category and all these requirements and things. I kind of timed it out to where I would do a certain part a day or a certain part a week. And I just wish I kind of had started on it a little bit sooner, just because I didn't realize once I opened up a certain portion, all the mini steps in between. So it was just a little stressful, but I will say once I submitted it, it felt very rewarding. It felt very relieving too. So I knew that the hard work for the application would be seen too.
So I was very lucky. DICAS was the only thing that I had to fill out. My other schools didn't have a supplemental application, and I started DICAS the day it opened, and I filled out personal information. I'm very lucky to have friends that were also just as nervous and scared for DICAS as I was, and I remember literally the moment it opened up, we were all working on personal information, just filling out as much as we could without really having to put too much brain power in. And I worked on it a lot over winter break. That was my main DICAS time, filling out everything. And when you kind of do it on a break, if you're applying for spring and it opens up in December, do it over winter break, because having almost everything done during winter break, coming back to the semester knowing, I had full hours, I was doing 16 hours this semester, I knew I had a lot. So to get it done during the break when you're really not doing much, or you're just working, or you're just hanging out with your family, do as much as you can then, because soon projects are going to start kicking up, homework, tests, and you're just going to lose the time, and then you're going to feel like you're cramming. Because I did it so early, and I did my personal statements super early too, I was just able to go back and edit them, and I wasn't super stressed out with, oh my gosh, I have to write 500 more words on my personal statement. But having everything done way ahead of time was such a relief, and I handed in DICAS early. And besides my whole transcript problem, get your transcripts in early, because I was panicking. My community college, it was not LSU, but it was my community college back at home, was having problems. And we had to overnight my transcript to DICAS because they were not receiving it, and it was just an absolute mess. So make sure you get your transcripts done. Just when you start the application, make sure you request those transcripts, especially to schools. If you already like did dual enrollment or you did a summer class, a winter class, make sure you get that information in as soon as possible. Learn from my mistake.
For Florida State, they don't go through DICAS. They do use D&D Digital still, which is the online matching program. So to get into Florida State's program, I had to apply and get accepted to their master's program by, I think the deadline for that was December 1st. And then you could apply for their internship after you had gotten accepted. So their internship application was fairly simple, especially if you compare it to DICAS. So, they asked for your transcript, kind of a little bit about yourself, resume, a personal statement, kind of just the basics about you and things that, DICAS also asks for, but it wasn't going in and manually entering each individual class, which was a big relief for me, at least. And then they also asked for at least 2 letters of recommendation, and that was due February 15th, I want to say. So it was a little before DICAS was due for everyone else. So that was something that I had to keep in the back of my mind, that they did have an earlier submission date than the DICAS.
Thanks again for checking out this episode of Going All In, Get the Edge You Need to Succeed. I have a whole new episode coming up with a continuation of these Q&As with these 4 graduates from LSU Dietetics. So stay tuned to check that out. But in the meantime, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time.